Hello. Hi, I'm Erica. I'm on the Leyden Select Board. This is an awesome turnout for a rainy evening, so thank you all for coming. You can't hear, Beth? Try that. Better? I mean, I can yell. Okay, that comes later. So a huge thanks for you guys. A huge thanks to the barn for hosting us. That was awesome. And again, as Jack said, there's snacks over there if you need any, tea, water, stuff like that. So you may have briefly met Jack. Jack is the Leyden Town moderator. He's going to be the moderator for tonight, so you'll be hearing from him on and off. He's a great guy. All right, we're here to talk about the regionalization grant that both Bernardston and Leyden are working on. I am not on the committee. Brian over there is, so I'm going to be super brief. I just wanted to bring up a couple crucial reasons why Bernardston and Leyden have hired the Collins Center to work on this particular grant. The first is that small rural towns like ours have reached the tipping point for hiring capable, professional, whether they're full-time or part-time, municipal employees. Mass general law, Department of Revenue, federal regulations, they're coming out every day. They are different from ever before, and everyone in town, from municipal employees to department heads to committee chairs, need to know what those new regulations and laws are so that both towns can stay on the right path and do the right thing every single time. The second one is that our budgets are going up. They're never going to come down again. Every year they go up and up. And for a town like Leyden, which is slightly different from Bernardston, I know, that relies on property taxes, it's tough. School budgets go up. Infrastructure is more expensive. Salaries have to go up, as they should. So what we're hoping to do is get a better understanding from this study what shared services are possible, if regionalization is the ticket, or if there's even a third, fourth, or fifth option. So the goal of the study is to identify a clear path forward to helping our towns be able to stay fiscally. That's a combination of fiscal and financially viable in the coming years. So Brian is actually on the committee, so I'm going to kick it over to him. Thank you, Brian.
My name is Brian. I'm on the select board in Bernardston. I sat on the finance committee in Bernardston for a number of years. Yeah, to just go with what Erica said. The idea behind this was to try to save both towns money in terms of their budget. How are we going to do that? What's it going to look like? We got the grant. The Collins Center really took a deep dive. In your handouts there will be everything that'll be up on the screen here, so you don't have to struggle to see the screen. Yeah, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get your feedback. What do you think? We're all the residents of these towns, but you know, it's not just the committee. We want to know what you think. That was. I can tell you this: when the subject first came up, I heard a couple of people use the word merging the two towns, and I cringed. I don't like that. Not because I didn't want to be part of Leyden or I didn't want Leyden to be part of Bernardston, but because I think we lose a little bit of anonymity, you know, and I didn't want that to happen for either town, for anybody within those towns. The more that we spoke about it, the more I realized it's not necessarily a merge, is not exactly what they meant. It's just merging services, just to try to, you know, curtail the rising costs of everything. So, but that's, and then I'll just echo everything Erica said. And thank you everyone for coming, and don't forget snacks. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack. There he is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jack Golden. I'm the moderator in Leyden, and tonight I don't know what. I'm just here. Now, speaking of being here, if you are from Bernardston, raise your hand, please. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And if you're from Leyden, raise your hand. Excellent. Good turnout. Good turnout. And if you're from another town altogether, you're in the wrong place. But enjoy the snacks anyway. No, we have if you're from out of either Bernardston or Leyden, raise your hand, please. Let's welcome our visitors from out of town. On the tables, there are sign-up sheets. If you could please fill them in, that would be great. We want to be able to track who was here, how many people, from which town, and so on. Here's basically how we're going to work it tonight. There's a couple speakers who are going to come up here. First, Liz Kidder, who's on the Regionalization Advisory Committee. And then Anthony Wilson, who's from the Collins Center. And part of Anthony's presentation is going to be a PowerPoint presentation. And what we're going to do, that PowerPoint presentation, boy, I don't want to have to say that again. It's like the sheets that you have in front of you, there are different categories or different topics like fire department, highway department, library, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is when Anthony finishes the topic on the library, we're going to throw it open to questions and answers about that topic. Then moving on to highway, and I don't know what the order is, but you get the idea. So that's going to be kind of short questions and answers, like maybe a total of 5 minutes doing that. Then we're going to get back into the PowerPoint presentation, move on to the next topic. Then when the PowerPoint presentation is done, then we're going to throw it open to kind of more wide-ranging questions and answers, suggestions, comments, so on and so forth. So there'll be a couple of different opportunities for you, if you have any questions or comments, to share them with us, which would be great. And I'm not part of this committee, but I just want to thank this committee. They're doing great work. Put your hands together for them. They're doing good work, taking up their time. And it's really going to be something that's going to be really helpful for all of us. I mean, our track record, the first thing that we've been sharing is police, and, you know, except for the chief, who is really kind of a problem. It's really, just speaking from a Leyden's perspective, it's been great. And I hope that that's true for all of you in Bernardston. You feel that too. So now, without any further ado, let me introduce to you Liz Kidder, the Leyden rep to the Regionalization Advisory Committee. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Jack. Hello, thank you all for coming. I'm just want to talk for a minute to give a brief background on the grant that we have and the Regionalization Advisory Committee that was established. How did this all start? Well, last year, there was a meeting at which several people from Bernardston and a couple of people from Leyden were at, and I think something happened, like there wasn't a quorum because another town didn't show up or something, and they got to talking. And just that day, there'd been a notice of funding opportunity that came out from the state to get an efficiency and regionalization grant. And we'd used one of those grants for the police agreement. And all of a sudden, about 2 weeks later, after lots of conversation, there was a joint meeting of the Leyden and Bernardston select boards, and they all decided on applying for a grant. Leyden agreed to take on the management of it, and Michelle did most of the writing on it, our town coordinator, and we got the grant. And so we've been working since last fall on this project. And I want to just go back to the purpose of that grant and the measure of success, 2 very short paragraphs that clearly explain what we told the state we wanted to do with these funds. It was about a $75,000 grant. And the purpose of the grant, and I'm quoting, is to engage a consultant to complete a feasibility study for the towns of Bernardston and Leyden. The 2 towns want to explore the full range of town obligations and services to determine those that could be shared, up to and including the possibility of a design for a single entity. That's the basic purpose of the grant. And when you get to the end of a grant application, they ask for your measures of success. We have a very simple statement. The measure of success will be a document that can be clearly interpreted as to which areas of municipal government make sense to share services. And this is important for each town in their long-range planning, end quote. So basically, this is a planning study designed to gather the information needed for the towns to make some informed decisions. And that's what we're doing with the grant. Very simple, straightforward. And as part of the grant oversight, a Regionalization Advisory Committee, or RAC, or some people say RAC, was formed. And there are 3 members from each town, representing Select Board, Finance Committee, and 1 citizen reps. And the representatives are Catherine DiMatteo, a Leyden Select Board member, and she's chair, and she's unable to be here tonight. And then Ginger Robinson, our Leyden Finance Committee rep. I'm the Leyden citizen representative. Brian Herview is the Bernardston Select Board rep. Tammy Snow, who's here, is the Bernardston Finance Committee rep. And did I get your name right, Tammy? Powell, sorry. Okay, sorry. And Richard DeGeorge is the Bernardston citizen rep. And we receive a tremendous amount of help from both Michelle Giarusso, Leyden's town coordinator, and Karen Kelly's town administrator. They have been really magnificent in all their help. So with the grant, we hired the services of the Edward J. Collins Center for Public Management, and Anthony's going to explain more about that group. And we've been meeting with their team almost monthly, often remote, and some people in attendance. And the committee established 6 priority areas to help focus the work of the Collins Center team as they look at the potential for shared services. We set up, number 1 was town administrator and town clerk. This is the basic business end of town government. The second priority was the town financial team, accountant, treasurer, tax collector, and assessors. The third area was public safety, combining police, fire, ambulance, emergency medical service, emergency management, and the highway department. The fourth priority was boards with regulatory responsibility, the ones you go and get a permit from. Conservation Commission, Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Board of Health. And then we grouped the cultural committees and departments such as library, Council on Aging, Senior Center, Cultural Center, Recreation Historical Commission, sort of the heart of the community. And then the creation of a single entity. In addition to meeting with the advisory committee, the Collins Center team has been interviewing both towns' department heads and is in the process of developing the baseline information needed for conducting the feasibility study. This included studying our annual budgets and contracts, which I'm very glad they're looking at rather than me. So I would like to introduce Anthony Wilson, who is the program manager from the Collins Center for this study. He's an attorney with a lot of experience in all sorts of town government. And so he's going to take on and present his PowerPoint and the findings they've been gathering for us. Anthony?
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Great, great. So I will start. What I'll start first is just an introduction of myself, and I'm actually part of a team from the Collins Center. So everyone couldn't be here. We had one member other than myself who had planned to be here. but they had a family emergency. So I'll just go through our backgrounds just very quickly so you know who's on this team, who's working with the RAC. So my name is Anthony Wilson. My background is that I started as a municipal lawyer in the city of Springfield. I've worked in the city of Springfield and the city of Cambridge, both as a lawyer and as a city clerk in both communities prior to joining the Collins Center to help with their, I lead the governance team, sort of looking at different communities and how they operate and ways to improve that internal operation. So in addition to my municipal life with cities, I've also worked with several smaller towns around the state while at the Collins Center. I'm joined on this team by Stephen Foley, who is an EMS professional, retired, and now works primarily in the western part of the state with a variety of communities, including Leyden and Bernardston, on a variety of regionalization projects in the public safety arena. We also have David Colton. He was a career town administrator in several smaller communities. He's primarily leading the part of our team that's looking at both the finances as well as some of the operational details related to highways and things of that nature. The last two I'll do very quickly. Marilyn Contreras, she used to work with the Secretary of State's office. She's doing a lot of the legal analysis around what do you need to share some of these services that go beyond a formal agreement that may require a special act at the state level. And Pat Lloyd, who is our employment expert. So she's an expert on labor and employment issues. So that's how we divided the sort of the analytical workload around the team. Oh, I'll speak louder. So next slide, please. Next slide. So I'll just do a quick overview on the Collins Center generally. So the Collins Center was created in 2008 with a specific purpose of providing technical assistance to cities, towns, and other state agencies. We've helped communities, we've helped more than 80% of the communities around Massachusetts, and we do a variety of work really in any number of areas, including IT, HR, finance, human resources, and so one of the things we're here for today, which is organizational issues as well as regionalization. Next slide. Liz kind of stole some of my thunder here, so I'm not going to get too much into the purposes of the grant. But what I can tell you is that, so we've been working with the RAC over the last several months, and we have been reviewing documents excluding the schools, the regional school that's sort of excluded from the study, looking at those various components, and we're going to produce up to 3 memos around both the services, the financial implications of further shared service, and then when the communities decide which direction they're leaning to, a sort of an analysis of what would be the best route to move forward in that direction. This public forum, and I believe that there's at least another one that will be scheduled in the future, are going to help the RAC as they review our analysis and as well as think about what the citizens, the residents want in terms of which direction they want to recommend sort of moving forward. Next slide, please. And this is just, again, Liz kind of read this out already. This is just a summary of the efficiency and regionalization grant. There's really two actually types of grants under this. One is for studies like what we're doing, which is just to analyze and think about what you want to do. And then there are further grants around actual implementation. So we've decided a path that we want to walk down, and we need funding to actually sort of start taking those steps. So you're in the initial planning phase, or you've got a grant for that initial planning assessment. Next slide. So what I want to start by orienting this group to is just there are already a number of services that are currently shared both between Leyden and Bernardston and with other entities around the region. So as you already say that you have a shared police department centered in Bernardston but serving both communities. You both receive your veteran services from the Pioneer Valley Veteran Services District. You both share a regional animal control officer. Both towns are members of the regional school districts, which I know that you all know. You have contracts for your ambulance service. Leyden receives those from Coleraine. Bernardston contracts with Northfield EMS. So there's already some fairly essential services to town operation that are already for lack of better terms, outsourced to other entities as well as shared between the two communities. Next slide. And I pulled out the treasurer specifically, and there's a question mark here, not because we don't know the situation. It's just that it is shared, but not in a formalized sense. So both communities have appointed the same person to the position of treasurer, but there's no formal agreement between the communities about sort of sharing that function. And there's some important consequences to that. In neither budget is this person designated as full-time, and that has some implications in terms of salary and benefits. It's currently a non-benefited position in both budgets. In Leyden in particular, they have that position has some additional responsibilities in terms of being the tax collector. And in terms of further or formalizing that integration, you both are using the same financial software, and you'll see this term come up frequently throughout the presentation, the VADAR software. Both communities are operating their financial platform, in which all the data goes into, is in VADAR. So if you were to further integrate those systems, that would not be a hurdle to a person working in both towns. So a slightly higher budget for this position in Leyden, in Bernardston than in Leyden. And so there could be some wiggle room in terms of making this position more competitive and offering sort of more benefits and potentially a higher salary. One of the things that will be a theme throughout the presentation is the challenges relative to hiring and retaining qualified professionals for these, particularly in the finance roles for both communities. The treasurer, most communities, the trend across the state is for treasurers and collectors to be subsumed in the same office, for that to be by one person. And there are many more responsibilities in terms of reporting to the state, annual audits and things of that nature that the treasurers have to do, that they either have to get up to speed on if they don't know about them, but more communities are looking for professionals that have that experience. I'll stop here to the moderator if this is for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony, so far. Does anybody have any questions around this issue that they'd like to bring up now? Anybody at all? All right.
Oh, I see a hand.
Here we go. If you would just say your name and what town you're from, and give me your question.
Melissa Murphy from Bernardston. I just have a question, actually two questions. One of them being, which town would the treasurer actually have their office in, or would they have it in both towns? And then also, I see that the budget in Leyden and Bernardston are noted on here, but how do we figure out who pays for what? Is it based on how many taxpayers are within the town? Is it split 50-50? How is that decided on?
So that was one of the reasons why there was a question mark here. So right now, I put a question mark by shared because there's not a formal agreement to share the treasurer. Both towns have hired the same person to be the treasurer. So there's not a split in terms of how they fund. And by the way, the budget line is actually not the salary. It's just the budget for that office. So that includes both the salary and other incidental office items. So there's no split. There's no formalized split in terms of how it comes out of each community's budget. It's whatever they budgeted for in their town meeting, and they fund that position. If the communities were to move forward and formally share the office and say, we're creating a single town treasurer to be the town treasurer for both communities, then that would be part of the next step, which would be how do we want to fund this position? Because there are actually two options. One option is to create, and it would have to be through special legislation, create a single position to cover both communities, you'd also require special legislation, or have one community share the treasurer of the other community. So to have them, in the same way that you do your police department, have one town hire the treasurer and then have like funding allocation or like a bill submitted to the other town to receive the services. I think at this point we'd recommend having a shared office, and to have towns sort of budget for both, and then we determine at the next stage how they do the distribution. Do you want to do it by population? Do you want to do it by? Bernardston has a more complex budget. They have more. You have more commercial real estate than Leyden. You've got a larger population. You've got some other things that make the town budget a little bit more complicated. That might be a factor in that type of analysis. Did I answer your question, or did I go on?
It sounds like we don't really know how it would be funded. It's going to be funded through two separate budgets, through Leyden and through Bernardston.
Yeah, if the towns, so let me back up for a second. So the slides that we're going to go through now are shared services, so not through a single entity. This is how do we share the services as two separate towns. And so both communities would have to set up, would have to budget for them in their own budgets. But when you set up a shared service, you'd create an agreement in which you determine how the cost would be distributed between the two communities. And it would be the next stage of this process to determine, is the most fair way to do that by population? Is the most fair way to do by how complicated each of our budgets are? Because you have both communities have different budgets. So there are options on how you want to split it. That would be the community's decision going forward.
All right, and we have another question here.
I'm wondering, and assuming that the intent would be to form, if consolidated position is created between the two towns, to actually form a professional position with full benefits, as in the 21st century, and not, sweatshops of the 19th century or something. It seems very unfortunate that we don't have benefits or a full-time, a capacity to fund a full-time position at this time. So I'm wondering if that's part of the way this is being looked at.
Yeah, what I would say is we can't make the decision for you, but we would say one of the benefits is that of sharing this position is that both towns could work together to make the position more competitive to potential applicants. Whereas now it's, if somebody's looking for this type of position, it's an unbenefited, relatively low wage, and because it's two different towns, you might not necessarily know that you could also be the treasurer for Bernardston and get that to the extent that there's a bump, get the bump for being for both towns. So again, one of the major benefits of sharing this type of service is to make the position more competitive to potential applicants.
I despair about this process because Bernardston is 3 times the size of Leyden. And how will this process benefit either of us when we already share services now? And we're looking at our treasurer, Susan Bovey, who's working full-time and has no benefits.
Excuse me.
And you look at I've looked through this whole plan, and before I came, I compared, I went to both websites of both towns and listed every committee, every commission, and the number of people on them, and it's completely disequal. And I'm wondering if the object of this plan is to try to regionalize to save money, someone's going to lose, and because we're so disequal in size.
Well, I guess I would just say, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a plan right now. We're doing a study to determine the feasibility, whether it makes sense to, yeah.
Understand, but within that study, you started with one town 3 times the size of the other.
Correct.
21, 2,000 versus 700, 21 versus 700.
Correct.
And there are subcommittees in Leyden that are larger than ours in Bernardston.
Yeah. Again, I'm not trying to argue, but I would say one of the things that we found sort of in the study is that Bernardston is 3 times bigger than Leyden. However, Bernardston does have some of the same issues, particularly we're starting here at the treasurer, around attracting and retaining a treasurer. You're 3 times bigger than Leyden, but you also you're not 3 times. You're not funding that department at 3 times.
But in any plan that comes up, we will hold the larger of the share of the responsibility. So what benefit is that to us where we are right now versus moving forward? We're in the financial hot seat. I'll put it that way.
Well,
We are 3 times
Yeah.
the size our tax.
I don't want to sort of, I'm not in the position of up here advocating, I'm just sort of conveying what we learned, but I would say, just in terms of the benefit, if we were to say the benefit to Bernardston, is rather than budgeting in your own budget to increase, to let's say, to make this position more competitive for the treasurer, you'd be sharing that cost with Leyden. So as I have looked at what we saw and what we've seen in sort of these interviews and the data, is that you could, in the next town meeting, increase the budget to make this a more competitive position when it has to be filled, or you can spread that cost around 2 towns and share it with Leyden. And therefore, the budget is what creates the tax burden. So therefore, you're mitigating a potential increase in the budget and potential increase in people's taxes going forward by spreading it over a larger population, even if the other population is 1/3 the size. Again, I'm not advocating, I'm sharing the information. That's what, that's sort of what we've seen as the possible benefit of sharing this type of position.
Okay, and we've kind of like used up our short amount of time for questions on this particular topic. So if you do have other questions about this particular topic, try to remember them and we'll get to them at the end. But Anthony, why don't you move on to the next?
Sure. I'll just sort of reemphasize that we do have at the end of the presentation, there's also Q&A. We do want the Q&A during the project, but there's more Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. So now we're getting into the more traditional structure in the sense that these are departments that are essential and resident-facing for both communities, but they are not shared really in any way at the current time. So these are the conservation commissions of both communities. Again, just some interesting things to note in terms of differences between the 2 communities. And again, I can sort of lapse into my other habits. Can you all hear me as I go through this? Great. So Bernardston, you have the same size Conservation Commission, and interestingly, you also have a vacancy in the same way that Leyden has a vacancy. So it's a 5-member commission. You've got 4 members seated, and you both have sort of 1 seat that's vacant. Bernardston has a part-time conservation agent. Leyden has no conservation staff. There's some interesting distinctions in terms of regulations. So Bernardston has some solar farm permitting and some other differences, the biggest one being the solar farm. Leyden does not permit that. Other than that, you're sharing really many of the similar functions for your conservation commissions in terms of permitting, site visits, things of that nature. Leyden, what we noticed or seemed to be a big issue for their conservation commission was around invasive species management. And there's some land management that's happening in Bernardston, which is around tracking sites, making sure that they're being maintained, things of that nature. So those are just those are sort of the key points of distinction and similarity for the 2 communities. Next slide, please. If you were to move forward in terms of regionalizing or sharing conservation services, there are actually 2 paths at this point, which there are 2 paths to it that have different benefits. So one is you could create, through a special act, a shared commission. So that's 1 commission. It doesn't have to be 5 members. You can make it larger because you'd be creating it through special act. But you could create a shared commission, or you could keep the separate conservation commissions and you could create an agreement to share staff, in this case, the conservation agent. Some of the challenge really to that is that there would still be 2 separate towns. They would still have their own regulations. So no matter which path you take, whether it's the agent or the commission, those regulatory entities would have to be aware of the different regulations and would have to know, like, if they're having a meeting about Bernardston regulations versus Leyden regulations, and they just have to keep track of that as they're sort of meeting. But they could operate as as a single commission. Some of the benefits could be an increase in hours for the conservation agent. So again, right now, part-time, there's one between the two communities, part-time, unbenefited. That person could increase their time, again, making that position more competitive, as well as the Conservation Commission. Depending on the size of the newly created Conservation Commission, you may not have to have the issue with the vacancies. You'll see as you go through different boards, vacancies comes up as an issue fairly regularly. So if you have, rather than 2 boards with a total of 10 members, if you had 1 board, again, I'm not saying that this will be the structure of the board, but let's say it was 7 members, you might have less of an issue in terms of vacancies by sharing them between the committees. I didn't specifically articulate it here in the slide, but if you were to go the first route, which is a shared commission, again, part of the next step would be how would we want to structure that? Do we structure it by population? In other words, a sort of 1-to-3 ratio in terms of how each community is represented, or do you sort of do it at large, where anyone can sort of be appointed to the commission? There's no, that, again, that will depend on community feedback and sort of what you want to do moving forward, but there's a number of different ways you can structure a shared commission that can address some of those issues around representation, which would be in a special act. So I'll stop here and open up for questions.
Any questions about conservation? Yes.
I'm Don Stadowski. I'm on the Conservation Commission in Leyden, and I would like to have a little bit of clarity. The discussion we have here has been characterized as sharing services. Conservation Commission and also Planning Board and other things don't just provide services. They make decisions on behalf of the particular jurisdictions. So is the intention here simply to merge some services, or are we actually talking about something broader?
Well, I would say, yeah, what we're doing is we're exploring all those options. So as we're going through these slides here, these first slides, we're looking at what would be like to share the services. And to share the services, as you alluded to, you're making decisions. One of the complications around sharing a Conservation Commission would be that there would be 2 sets of regulations for 2 different towns that shared commission would have to keep in mind when it's making decisions. So when it makes a decision for, if it makes a decision for Bernardston, that's not the same as making a decision for Leyden. So that's a challenge related to shared service. Now, if you were to go further, and I can tell you when we get to the end of it, one of the last slides will be not an in-depth analysis on creating a single entity, but just sort of the process to get there. If you were to go that route, then you would go through a process of harmonizing regulations so that there would be regulations that span both communities. But this is, again, the presentation here is around two distinct communities, but sharing a Conservation Commission for both.
So just not clear, that's not just shared services, that is shared governance. And I'm not expressing an opinion on what's good or bad on that, but I think we need to be clear that not all of these are shared services. We're actually talking about shared governance in some of these cases. That would be people, the Conservation Commission, if it were merged, would be people in Leyden, commissioners that are in Leyden making decisions on behalf of Bernardston and the other way around. Whether that's a good or bad thing needs to be explored, but we need to be very clear. We're not just sharing services.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Just kind of a note on that. I can imagine if there's shared governance, we're going to have even about just one committee, even a smaller board, we will have to have very serious conversations, the citizens and select boards and finance committee. I mean, that is a huge thing, and there would be very serious conversations around that. And it would be something that would come to town meeting, and we would all really need to agree on if we go to that point.
All right, we've got one here.
Lisa Lamont from Leyden. Just a quick question. You referred to a special act, and earlier you referred to special legislation. Is that statewide legislation? And
Let me clarify. So when I was saying special act and special legislation, I'm actually talking about the same thing, but using 2 different terms, and I'll use special act going forward. And it's a piece of legislation that would come from, in this case, both towns, that the state legislature would have to act on. It would apply only to your two towns.
My name's Sarah Steinberg, and I'm from Leyden. I want to thank the Collins Center for your work, and there's some kind of tension in the room. It's hard when people live in two different towns, and it feels like we're going to lose our identities. But I just want to say the spirit of us being here together is to share something, and that the assumption is that we will be stronger together, and we will agree to do things that benefit all of us. And so if we can continue this conversation in good faith, because we have been good neighbors to each other, and we already have shared services that are working well, and I think we can really do well together in this room if we continue the conversation in that spirit.
Thank you. Yep. All right, moving on.
Next slide, please. So the library, so again, same thing as before. We're going to go through sort of both communities. So right now in Bernardston, you have a part-time director and 2 part-time staff and 1 on-call staff. In Leyden, you have 1 director plus a large pool of volunteers that this person's corralling. Bernardston has a board of library trust. I mean, both communities have a board of library trustees. In Leyden, there's 3 elected. In Bernardston, you have 12 elected trustees, and you have 2 vacancies on that board. A relatively large board, I guess, in terms of library boards across the state. The Bernardston Library is open 19 hours a week. The Leyden Library is open 12 hours a week. They both offer a variety of different programming in addition to just housing books. They offer a variety of play groups and other different activities for families as well as other residents. In addition to offering the programming, they maintain their building and they use their facility as a meeting space, again, for the different communities. Significantly different budgets, again, harken back to the budget we looked at for the treasurer, where it was, there's it's a few percentage points that they're larger here. Bernardston has got a significant larger budget for the library than Bernardston. They're spending $83,000 approximately on the library budget, whereas Leyden is spending $32,000 on the budget. Next slide. So if they were to share services, again, to your point, we would look at a shared service model as well as the governance in terms of the library board being the governance body for the library. Because of the integrated structure and how involved the trustees are with sort of how the libraries operate, we think that would be the best model rather than just sharing library staff, and that would operate, you'd effectuate that through some sort of special act that would sort of specify how those trustees are chosen and the reporting structure and things of that nature. If you were to create the shared library, there's a couple decisions that both communities would have to make, which is, do we want to keep both libraries? One of the things, pros and cons, one of the things about keeping both libraries is it can be more expensive to maintain older libraries. So there's a capital cost that the towns could look at as it thinks about sharing libraries. One of the benefits of actually having both libraries is that one of the things we heard in our interviews was that there can be a mismatch in terms of capacity, particularly around the meeting space issue. Oftentimes, Bernardston has stated that they don't have the ability to allow meeting space for all the people that want to have a meeting or use the library facilities, whereas Leyden can have some extra capacity. So, on the other side of keeping both library buildings, you may be able to sort of mitigate that issue in terms of people not being able to have meeting space and having unused capacity. Sharing the libraries, again, this is going to be a theme across as we look at all the slides. Making the positions, the actual staff positions, more competitive in terms of salary and benefits, possibly turning some of the part-time positions to full-time. That would be a part of the consideration, which would also lead to perhaps longer library operating hours. One other thing to keep in mind, and this will sort of be in the report, but for this group to know, is that based on the population that the library serves, there can be different certifications needed by the state. There's a state body that governs municipal libraries. And as the population increases that the library serves, that person is required to have additional certification. There is the possibility of waiving that type of certification, for a certain period of time. So if you were to move forward with some form of merging these services and that were to be impacted, that would just be part of the things that we would sort of look at in structuring that transition to make sure that your librarian, the head of your library doesn't lose the appropriate certification. So I'll stop here again. And
All right, are there some questions on library? I see a couple.
Hi, I'm Tom Raffensperger. I'm from Leyden. I'm the chair of the Library Board of Trustees in Leyden. And in my day job, I'm the library director at Westfield State University. I'm also on the executive board of the Massachusetts Library System, which is the system that governs the 1,600 libraries in Massachusetts. I'm the former president of the Massachusetts Consortium for Libraries and Public Higher Education. And I used to be on the East Hampton Library Board as well. So I do libraries a lot. I want to also say I really appreciate the effort of this group in looking at efficiencies. I think efficiency, lower taxes, combining effort, doing things together that we can do better together is a really great idea. I do want to emphasize that libraries have been on the forefront of sharing services and creating efficiencies for 50 years. I remember someone from MHEC, which is a consortium for higher education, came to our academic libraries and said, you can save money with collaborative purchasing. It's like, yeah, we've been doing that since 1970. So I think, we're all members of MLS, which does delivery of books around the state. Both Bernardston and Leyden are members of the Western Mass, Central and Western Mass Library Consortium called CW Mars, and that helps us share books across the region. We have a shared catalog. The Massachusetts Library System has consultants that will come out to libraries, small libraries like ours, and work with them, teach them new things. Massachusetts Library System has a training system for librarians because it is hard to have folks with very little library experience in small towns learn the skills they need and get the help they need. So there's already a lot of consolidation efficiencies going on. One thing that's difficult to consolidate is proximity. So if you live on the west side of Leyden and you want to bring your kids to the library, how many people here had an extra 40 minutes in their day today and just wanted to know what to do with it? I'm being a little bit facetious, and I'm sorry to do that, but I feel very strongly about this. If library services are only in one place, you really have to look at how long it takes people to get there. Whether you've got a car full of kids or you've got a doctor's appointment afterward, it really matters how close the library is. And I really appreciate Sarah's comments on sharing and doing things together, but I do also think that Leyden is a place, and it has a heart, and the library is a big part of that. And I'm concerned about losing part of that. So I'll end with the headline of a Boston Globe article that was about our library in Leyden that said every town needs a library, no matter how small the town is. So,
Thank you. And remember, we're really at the early stages of just exploring this. So these are good points or good questions, but, there's a long way to go. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of sitting down and talking in smaller groups about all these issues. So here's another question right here.
I didn't have a question. What he said is what I was going to say. But I also wanted to mention that I know Bernardston has a very large elderly population. And for them to have to drive to Leyden would not work. And the commute for families with children, the same thing. As much as I agree with regionalization, I think whoever's on this committee to make these decisions needs to realize that this is definitely going to be an issue.
Great, thank you. One other question, comment?
I just want to point out that Montague currently has 3 branch libraries within their 5 villages, so it's being done right here in Franklin County successfully already.
Great, thank you. Let's move on. Sarah, something you got to say? Okay. I'm going on Karen's side.
I just want to say I love libraries. I want there to be as many as possible, but I do think I don't want us to be short on imagination. There's ways for us to have a Leyden library and a Bernardston library and share services and make sure Karen Parks is celebrated all over the place because she's the best librarian. And then also just there's ways for us to make things better for everyone and still keep our libraries.
Okay, great. Moving on.
Next slide, please. So now we're going to look at the Council on Aging, and I believe someone actually sort of did a nice segue for us talking about sort of the aging population. So 2 separate COAs, 2 separate COA boards. There's a 7-member board in Bernardston. There's a 5-member board in Leyden. There are 2 vacancies on the Leyden board. Bernardston also has 2 associate members on their board. Bernardston has 1 full-time and 3 part-time employees for their COA. There's no dedicated employees for the Leyden COA, but there's an administrative assistant in the office that does assist with certain things, ordering the food and supplies for the various events that are conducted by the board. Bernardston provides a senior lunch daily. Leyden provides a senior lunch monthly. Both provide senior transportation, but in different ways. Bernardston has a grant-funded operation, whereas Leyden is supported through the PVRTA. They provide various programs, social programs, health and wellness programs. And Bernardston has a senior center, and there are some Leyden seniors that we've heard that visit that senior center in Bernardston here and there. There's again, this is one of the departments that there's a big differential in the budget. It's a $125,000 budget in Bernardston, and there's a $32,000 budget in Leyden for the services operated by the Council on Aging. Next slide, please. So the integrated structure here, we're talking about a similar thing where you integrate both again, you don't have to, but this is the one that, based on our analysis, we think probably makes the most sense in terms of sharing the services, which is sharing a board and staff, not just the staff. And again, to create a shared board and staff model, you'd need a special act. The shared budgets of both towns could do a couple of things: increase the transportation budget, which seems to be one of the things that the Council on Agings do that people find to be very impactful or important, the transportation services, as well as their other programs, as well as, as I said a number of times now, sharing the budgets would allow for an increase in staffing, whether it is increasing the number of employees or increasing part-time to full-time staff. So then there's the question of the senior center. Again, there are some Leyden residents that have used it. That wouldn't necessarily increase, but the shared entity would have control over the senior center. And Bernardston, based on the analysis that we did and the people that we talked to, Bernardston actually does incorporate some of the Leyden residents that it anticipates serving when it applies for grants. So moving forward, and this is not uncommon for Council on Agings, they do a lot of things through grant funding. There's been historically a lot of grant funding from the state for Council on Aging services. So offering a shared service and providing the service for both communities would actually could make that new entity more competitive in terms of getting grants and applying for grants, rather than just predicting, that we're going to have a certain number of Leyden residents when Bernardston applies for grants. So there's actually an increase. This is one of the unique ones where there could potentially be an increase in revenue from grant-funded sources. So I will stop here and open it up for questions. I'm making you work.
Yeah, no, thank you. Questions on Council on Aging? Seeing that, oh, almost, so close.
I think that Bernardston,
Please say who you are and where you're from.
Amy St. Clair Leyden. I think that Bernardston already has shared a number of grants with us, and we benefited from that collaboration. And I also wanted to say that Bernardston has a lot of other programs that are interesting and I think the community enjoys. So I think this affiliation would be really good for us.
Great, thank you very much. Anything else? Going, gone.
Next slide, please. So the next slide is on fire services. So this is going into that services. So this is one of your larger. This is probably one of your largest departments. So Bernardston and Leyden both have fire departments. Bernardston has an 18-member fire department, including the chief, 5 officers, and 12 firefighters. Leyden has a chief, assistant chief, EMS coordinator, clerk, firefighter, and 1 additional firefighter for a total department of 5. I can tell you sort of, as we, this has come up slide in each slide, which is around sort of the personnel challenges. When we first did the review of the departments, there were more employees in the Leyden Fire Department than up here on the slide, because some people have taken positions in other places since even the 6 months that we've been doing this study. So, that's sort of, just to emphasize, that's one of the things that, one of the major challenges is in that keeping and retaining personnel across the two communities. So you've got a variety of equipment in both towns. I'm not going to sort of read it all. I'm not a fire department expert, but you've got a variety of equipment. One of the sort of major differences in Bernardston is they've got a newly renovated facility for their fire department, which is, that's a big step. Also, one of the other big things, this is another department where there's a significant differentiator in funding. So the Bernardston Fire Department has a budget of about $193,000, whereas the Leyden Fire Department has a budget of $48,000. Next slide. So, in the potential for sharing, we would structure this one similar to the agreement that you have around the shared police services. So this one would look more like your shared police services. And a sharing services has the possibility of improving the training for the fire department staff, increasing the funding, which may, again, this goes to that things you're going to hear over and over again tonight, which is around competitiveness of both the salary and the benefits for the personnel in this department. The communities, you'd have an increase in equipment for both communities, because you'd have the equipment that you already have currently, and you combine it. You have what we call mutual aid. So you have agreements with other communities in addition to each other around if there's a fire issue that community will come and help Leyden or Bernardston. Both communities have agreements with the same other communities. So you wouldn't there wouldn't be a significant change or renegotiation of those mutual aid agreements. That one can be a little bit complicated, but essentially you've got agreements with your neighbors to help you in case of an emergency. Both communities have the same agreements with the same neighbors, so that is not a hindrance. That wouldn't be too complicated in terms of sharing the service. And one of the other benefits that Bernardston has is their members are part of the Franklin County retirement system, so they're funding a retirement program through them. So that would be one of the benefits of creating a shared service, is that all of the employees that would be providing services for both towns would get that, could participate in that benefit, assuming that you wanted to move forward in that way. So I'll stop here and I will open the floor to questions.
All right. Questions about fire? Wow. Seeing a few. Hang on, I'll get over there.
Hi, Carol Costiba, I live in Leyden. So my question would be, if we had a shared fire department, would that mean there would only be one physical place where Bernardston has the new one? Everything would be based out of Bernardston, or would there still be a substation in Leyden with trucks availability there? Because otherwise, it could be 10, 15 minutes for something to get from Bernardston to Leyden if everything was based in Bernardston.
So so I think the best analysis, the sort of the comparator that we had was around the police, was around the shared police service. And there, from what we saw, there was a concern around response times for the shared police services, which didn't seem to materialize. Now, having said that, we're in the analysis phase. At this point, I wouldn't say that you couldn't have a substation, but when we looked at it, it's comparing to the way things have worked under the shared police service. It didn't seem like response times for this type of service are as big of an issue if you wanted to have one department. Now, if you want to have one physical location for the police, for the fire department, and I think to the extent that recommendations would be made, you would have to give some credence to the fact that Bernardston has the newer facility. Now, again, I'm not advocating, I'm not saying that you wouldn't have a substation. I'm just saying that if we were to sort of compare police and fire, response times didn't seem to be as big of an issue as people may have originally thought when they first entered that agreement. And even if it was, at this point, you could have a substation, if you want to mitigate that issue.
All right, question, Karen, do you want to?
Oh, I just wanted to, Michelle might know a little bit, Michelle Druso might know a few more details than me, but Leyden did go into some talks with Greenfield about sharing a fire department. There can be issues with homeowners insurance and not having a fire station close by. I would say, I want anything I feel like is possible, but I would say it is very likely that Leyden would be, our current fire station would be a substation. And I also think that for all the safety of all of us, I hope to see this as one step, our two towns, and then adding more towns. I think the more professional firefighters, and I don't want to knock on these guys, they are professional, like they work very hard, these men and women on the fire departments. But the more time, the more money we can give them, the better equipment, safety is going to be better for everyone. And I actually would like to see maybe like 5 towns, or I think that there's a lot of room to go, and the efficiency of the dollar used, I think, will be greatly stretched if we do this all together.
All right, thank you. We got a question over here.
Hi, I'm Jeff Baker. This is really good, the two towns getting together. I'd just like to see more and more conversation on the fire with the cost of equipment, cost of training. It's just enormous, so I'd like to see some more talk and coming together with the fire stations.
Great, thank you. Another question over there. Yep.
Peter Shedd, Fire Chief, Town of Bernardston. The insurance company is a big deal. If you do not have a station in Leyden, you potentially have no insurance companies, or the insurance companies can choose not to insure anybody. Or they can jack their rates up to whatever they want. There's no more limit. If you have an active fire station and have active people there, they now have a blanket over them to limit to what they can raise their insurance.
Great.
The other plus to this, to be in a shared unit, I believe, is when they do their ISO rating, which the insurance companies base their rates on. Now, if we shared, I can count Leyden's tanker as 1,500 gallons of water for my town. Leyden would be able to turn around and count our trucks as water supplies for their towns. So it would improve their rating overall, or keep their rating down. The lower the rating, the better your insurance rate.
Great, thanks. So it looks like we're going to have 2 library buildings and 2 fire stations, which is cool with me. We've got a question right here.
Hi, I'm Ginny DeSorger, the mayor from Greenfield, and I came tonight. I'm grateful I came to learn from you tonight, because I'm not seeing how any of us are going to be able to survive if we're not doing something together. And I can see there are many questions as we go forward, but some of these things will work better, in my opinion, if we do part of it together. I think we might be needing a boat. And, you know, it is possible on some of the capital expenses, keeping your own fire departments, et cetera, but that you're able to share a capital expense. Again, here to learn, but we're talking about dispatch as a shared service. That's something that we will be looking into. Looking into the things that are easiest, the first to do. And I just have one other comment, is on the employees. Again, here to learn. There are not municipal employees as inspectors. You cannot find them. You can't find assessors. You cannot find people in municipal finance. And so if we could put some of those together without leaving, you know, without taking away anybody's buildings and their beloved library or fire station, and that the fire chief, you're so correct about the insurance. I've heard that. But we have to learn to share. Every municipality within a 50-mile radius was having trouble meeting its budgets, and I so appreciate tonight's invitation.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Oh, hi.
Hi, thank you. I'm Mark Fitzpatrick, Bernardston. I was going to wait and hold this to the end of the meeting, but what Jenny just talked about, and the woman from Leyden, what is being overlooked and is normal is professional turf responsibilities. If you can't overcome that, none of this will happen. Bernardston did that in the 1990s. Chief Taftner was retiring. So Bernardston reached out to Gil in Northfield to have a regional police force. One supervisor. The towns don't lose their identity, but the supervisor manages the police in the three towns. You know, very practical. Well, Gil agreed to it. Northfield did not. Northfield did not want to lose their identity, you know, which we understood. And as time goes on, municipal services is not going to be cheap. You know, it's going to get worse. But there's no reason why you don't need 27 town accountants. You don't need 27 treasurers. It's ridiculous. Out in the Midwest, they don't do it that way. We just do it here. So if, you know, as attrition happens, if we hire shared professional services, one supervisor supervising the staff, managing that particular department, it's cost control. It's not cheap. You know, and you can hire the professional services that you need. Police, fire, accountants, treasurers, you know, it becomes attractive. But the first thing that has to be addressed is professional turf responsibilities. If people can't give that up, and it's either the town identity or the department identity, there'll be resistance, and you'll be, you know, you'll be spitting in the wind. So I do hope this moves forward.
Thank you. One more question, then we're going to move on.
My name is Bob Anson. I'm from Leyden. I'd like to express two quick thoughts. First of all, I'm delighted to see that the Bernardston Fire Department is receiving the benefit of the Franklin County retirement system. As we expect professionals to do the best job for us, we must do the best for them. And I would look forward to more of these bodies or more of these paid positions being part of an organized retirement system. With that being said, I'd like to leave you with two words: stronger together.
All right, thank you. Oh,
Fire chief. Point correction on the retirement benefits. I am currently the only one in the town of Bernardston for the fire department that is under the county retirement. And I'm over 65, and they're sitting there holding my money, and they won't release it to me. Everybody else, I believe, is like OBRA or something like that, and it's a different system, so they didn't have to meet the age requirements like the Franklin County retirement does.
okay, thanks a lot. All right, Anthony, rock and roll.
I'll give Karen a second to get back to No, don't rush. Yeah. Next slide. So the next slide is on the highway and the DPW department. So here again, this distinction. So Bernardston has 7 full-time highway DPW employees, 2 part-time seasonal employees. Leyden has a full-time superintendent and 1 additional full-time employee, as well as 3 per diem employees. There's a lot of what they do that's very similar across both departments in terms of taking care of the roadway, sweeping, cleaning, stormwater, snow and ice removal. Some other things that is under the purview of the Bernardston DPW is the management of the solid waste transfer station in Bernardston, custodial services for town buildings. Leyden, they do custodial services, but not within their highway department budget. They budget out in other departments for that, as well as Bernardston does groundskeeping and maintenance for various town greens and things of that nature. Again, this is another one where there's a significant difference in terms of the budgets. Bernardston's budget, $700,000. Leyden's budget, about $400,000. Next slide, please. So they could form a joint, but again, the potential for shared services, they could form a joint highway DPW department. The joint funding could increase the personnel for this new joint department, as well as pay for the expenses of additional equipment. The shared services, they would share the maintenance costs for the variety of equipment that both communities have. In this case, the question about coverage that came up for the fire department was much more important, not, I'm not saying much more important here, but when we looked at it for the DPW highway department, if you were to merge or share services for your highway DPW department, you would want to keep two different facilities, or at least a station and a substation, because especially relative to snow and ice removal, in terms of making sure that you get appropriate coverage within a reasonable time, it would make sense to have, based on where they're geographically located. Leyden residents use the Bernardston transfer station. They also have an agreement with Greenfield to use their transfer station. These things wouldn't change or necessarily be affected by any type of merger. And again, I just noted here again, relative to the fact that there are custodial services in Leyden, but they're just provided outside of the budget for your highway department. So I will stop here and then open it up for questions. So I'll move to the next slide. So getting to the more financial positions. So the assessors, so both communities have a board of assessors. The board of assessors is a position really created under state law. So you've got 3 appointed, so Leyden's got 3 appointed board members. Bernardston has 3 elected board members. I just noted that the transition was relatively, or I think in process. Also, both communities have an assistant assessor. Now, I want to just stop here on the position of assistant assessor, is that the board of assessors is usually composed of residents, whether elected or appointed, who have an interest in participating in, it's a fundamental part of your budgeting process. The assessors, or the Department of Assessing, determines the taxable land that's within the community, and that is how you formulate your property taxes based on the relationship to the budget. So your board of assessors are, I don't mean to disparage them, but they're residents and they're citizens that have an interest in participating in that process. Your assistant assessor, especially in modern times, is really a technical expert in how the assessment process works. Because assessing, there's several regulations from the state, there's a whole process around people disputing assessments, and so there's significant technical information that's required for that position to make sure that the assessments are legal and that they, function for both towns' budgets. So even though it says assistant assessor, that is actually a very integral position for the entire assessing and really the budgeting process for any community. I just want to clarify that around the assessors. So in Bernardston, you've got close to, not a full-time, but close to a full-time position, working 20 to 30 hours per week. In Leyden, your assistant assessor is working 7 hours per week. Again, they're doing a lot of the same things in terms of what it means to properly assess a community. Major differences are around the billing cycle. So Bernardston is billing semi-annually, Leyden is billing quarterly. Again, Bernardston, being the larger community, has many more parcels. It also has a larger distribution in the different types of parcels. For example, they have more commercial properties, which their value is calculated a little bit differently than your residential parcels, which is again noted down below. Budget's relatively small in terms of $54,000 for the Bernardston, actually closer to $55,000, and closer to $29,000 for Leyden. So just under twice as large. Next slide. So, based on the information here, again, this is assuming that you're still two separate towns. We actually wouldn't recommend going the route of merging the boards. In this case, we'd recommend sharing an assessor. That way you could increase the salary, make the person full-time, provide more benefits, things of that nature. We noticed that it's legally questionable whether or not you even would be allowed through a special act to merge the Board of Assessors. It's something that could be pursued, but again, based on the distinction between how different the towns are in terms of the property and sort of the uniqueness of that really across the state, we think that would be sort of an uphill battle. Both communities use the same database. So one of the other important things for assessors, I don't know if the assessor's here, but it's how do we maintain the database in terms of where the information around the parcels go, because there's a really big calculation that they do to calculate the tax rate. And I just pointed this out when we talked to the assessor, that the Leyden assessor also works in Heath and Coleraine, demonstrating that it's not unusual for an assessor to sort of do the assessments for multiple communities. Again, there's no formal agreement, so Leyden's not sharing, they don't have an agreement to share their assessor with these two communities. Because they only work 7 hours in Leyden, they have the ability, they have the time to do that. Now, again, why that's important is that even though you're using the same database, when the assessor transitions to do the assessments or the tax rate for both communities, they'd have to just make sure that they're in the right database for the right community. There are different databases, but that's not a challenge for you in terms of having one person learn both databases and do that manipulation. They just have to be aware that they're operating in two different databases. So I'll stop here. We can talk a little bit more about if you want to discuss merging the Board of Assessors. It wouldn't be something that we think is feasible at this time, but we can discuss that if people have questions.
Great. So now let's take questions, comments about the assessors, or we'll just open it up. We only have probably about 15 minutes or so left. So if you have questions, comments, particularly things that might be useful for the committee to, put in their pipe to smoke, so to speak, that would be great. But anyway, if you have a question about any of this stuff for Anthony or to share with the committee, this is a good time to do it.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
If you're going to do that, do you want me to just quickly, so the last couple slides are all administration. Do you want me to just go through them all at once and then do questions at the end?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
that's cool, yeah.
I apologize, I guess I'm going to go quickly through these last few slides. They're all in the same realm, which is administration and finance. So the accountant, right now, Bernardston actually outsources their accountant. They use a CBIZ. They've outsourced their accountant to a third-party consultant. Leyden still has they've hired a person to be the consultant. The person works 6 to 8 hours a week. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. This and the assessor and some of the other positions we're going to talk about next, highly specialized. There's a certain background of information people have to do these. For the most part, they're doing the same type of work, with the exception of in Bernardston, they've got a CBIZ software. There's just a couple unique things about working with a vendor that they do. The vendor actually does a lot of stuff in terms of communicating with department heads as needed, sort of going forward. Both communities, even though Bernardston has a vendor, it uses the Vadar accounting platform. Again, that's just, think about an Excel spreadsheet where you put your monthly budget in. It's more complicated than that, but just they're using the same software, so that in terms of sharing that, it wouldn't be that big of an issue. The budgets are significantly different. CBIZ is substantially more. You're paying a lot more for CBIZ than they are paying for their part-time town accountant. So the budget's $53,000. and the budget for Leyden is $18,000. Next slide. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly. I want to sort of hit the high points, which are around the accountant. Again, that's a specialized position. Your accountant is actually an accountant I'm sorry, I'm talking about Leyden. The accountant is actually an accountant. They work part-time at Leyden. They actually work part-time in some other communities as well. It's getting harder for communities, particularly rural communities, to find accountants. I wouldn't be surprised if at some time in the future you had to move to a model in Leyden similar to what they have in Bernardston, which you're hiring a consultant to come in and be the accountant or a vendor. And it's going to definitely cost more money than you currently are paying for the part-time position. So whether it's increasing the salary to attract or keep an accountant in the future or paying for a vendor, in the near future, you're probably looking at just paying more money for this particular type of service. And it's, again, the situation in sort of rural Massachusetts, it's not uncommon for an accountant to work in two communities. And so if you shared them, again, same things that apply to the other slides, increased benefits, increased pay, more competitive for that position. Next slide. So the town clerk, both communities have a town clerk. The Bernardston town clerk works 24 hours. The Leyden town clerk works 19 hours. I'm not going to go through the various responsibilities. They do very similar things for the most part in both communities. The budget for the Bernardston town clerk is $49,000, about $50,000. The budget in Leyden is $22,000. And I can't stress enough, this is the department budget. These are not specific salaries. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits, you could have the shared clerk could switch between the two offices to provide coverages. To provide coverage because you could have an increased budget. You could probably even make the assistant town clerk more full-time or increase their hours to allow for that type of rotation. Having the shared town clerk may allow for the office, particularly in Leyden, to be open more often for residents to have more access to the town clerk. The town clerks in both communities are using pretty much the same systems, so that would not be a major hurdle for either community. Before I go to the next slide, I'll just point out that we, in our discussions with the clerk as well as members of the select board, hiring town clerks has been in recent years has been a bit of a challenge, really in both communities, to attract the right talent to fill them. So that trend in terms of finding it hard to hire a person in that role, it doesn't seem that trend seems like it'll continue. Next slide. The town administrator. So Bernardston has one town administrator working full-time. She's working now on the slideshow. Leyden has one town coordinator. She's also here. Make sure that things are running well. They have some similar responsibilities in terms of what they do. I would say both work 4 days a week in terms of operating for town. The Leyden town administrator is also the procurement officer and does the billing for the municipal light and power, for the municipal light plant, excuse me. And the budgets are approximately the same for these two offices, $68,000 for Bernardston, $63,000 for Leyden. Next slide, please. So sharing the town administrator could allow for a town administrator and an assistant to share the workload. Both positions, because of the complexity of the role. I just give an example. Right now, the Leyden town administrator is managing the grant, the efficiency grant that we're operating under. So there was a significant amount of work in terms of just administrative work up front in terms of applying for the grant. And Leyden, actually, in both communities actually have a number of grants. A lot of that gets routed through your town administrator or town coordinator's office. So there's a significant level of administrative work that happens in both offices. So by allowing you can both increase the person's, the time and have an assistant could allow the proper distribution of those types of tasks to be more efficient. You've had challenges in the past hiring for both positions. Again, due to in the past, it's relatively recently that even Bernardston's town administrator became full-time or had more time. So you could increase the salary and you're already full-time now, so if you were to share, you probably share the full-time person. But you could add another position. I'm trying to go through this quickly. And there's little challenge to the particularly merging these two positions. And I apologize for going quickly. I'm trying to hit the high points on each slide as time is ticking down. Next slide, please. So I want to just quickly, we're not going to go to, we haven't looked at this too in depth yet, but I wanted to talk about the process of forming a merged entity or a single entity, because, you know, it can be, it's a new thing. It can be scary for people. So if at some point in the future, both communities want to move forward with trying to create a single entity, I just want to sort of lay out the process. So it would start with both communities drafting a special act. The term is home rule petition because it comes from both communities. They'd have to draft it. The select boards would have to review the petition. Both select boards would have to review their own petition. They'd each have one. And then would have to go to town meeting to be considered and voted on by all of the members of town meeting. If the town meeting voted to approve the petition, both petitions, again, this is the petition in each community, then would have to go to the state legislature for approval. If the legislature approves the petition to create a single entity for both towns, then that would come back and it would actually end up on the ballot in both communities. So both communities, you'd have the town meeting that would review it, and then before it would come to effect, it would have to be reviewed by the legislature, and finally it would have to be approved by all of the voters in both towns if they wanted to sort of go the single entity path. And then if it were to be adopted, then you would start what I call really the process of becoming a single entity. It wouldn't happen overnight. There would be a process whereby you would harmonize your bylaws, you'd harmonize your zoning bylaws, you'd go through a process of figuring out how you would create a joint select board and all these other things. So it wouldn't be something that would happen quickly. There are several places along that pathway where residents would have to have their input, the state would have their input, and the select boards would have to review any of these types of decisions. So again, this is up there just to let you know, because that's one of the options under the grant. Even if the REC were to recommend this going forward, there are a bunch of different process steps that have to happen before that became a reality. So with that, I will stop and turn it back to you for the questions.
All right. Hey, first of all, let's give Anthony a hand. That was a lovely presentation. Thank you. First question. Oh, yeah, me. I'm Jack Golden from Leyden. I have a question. The process. If Leyden and Bernardston decided to merge 3 different things or 6 different things, does that all get lumped into one process, or does that process need to be repeated for each individual town accountant, fire department, so on?
So that's a good question. So presumably, if coming out of the REC is a recommendation to merge, 2 or 3 or 4 different departments or services, that would be one package of proposals to be reviewed by the select board and ultimately by the town meeting. All of the proposals wouldn't require a special act, or I'm sorry, there are different routes, so all of them don't require a special act. To the extent that they require a special act, that is something for the town meetings to vote on and send up to the state, we would structure those in one piece of legislation, so you wouldn't have a number of them to vote on. Now, we could, and I think that would be a decision for the select boards to probably make later on, depending on, again, that would depend on, for example, I'm just using this example, I'm not saying this is happening, but let's say it was highway and library, and there was a feeling that maybe the library one wouldn't pass for whatever reason. Then in that case, then you'd make the tactical decision to say, we want to have these as separate petitions so that we'd allow the voters at the town meeting the option to say we want one and not the other. But for convenience sake, if you really got the impression that these are all going to pass or they're going to be considered as a package, you could make them as one document for one vote. The same thing for a shared services agreement. It would take the same path. Now, I'm sorry, if you were to go the shared services agreement route for some of them, for example, the fire department, there would be separate agreements that would have to be voted on separately, but they could all come at the same meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we have about 10 minutes or so. Excuse me. And we have a couple of questions here.
Hi, Melissa Murphy again. Just a quick question. So I'll preface this with, I do understand that we are not in a sharing capacity right now with all of our services, but I do just wonder what is the financial benefit to the town of Bernardston if we were to share our facilities. If I were from Leyden, I think I would definitely see the benefit. Being a Bernardston taxpayer, I don't see the benefit right now, and I just wonder when that information is going to be given to us, since I didn't feel like when I asked the question when we were back on the first slide about the treasure and the money there, how that gets allocated between Bernardston and Leyden, I didn't feel like that really got answered. And I guess it's because there isn't an answer for that at this time. But with that being said, how do we know if this is a good fiscal plan for Bernardston if that part of the data isn't there yet?
That's a good question. So we actually, one of the next memos that we're going to provide is a financial analysis to the RAC board. So that's coming. In terms of what I can tell you from the initial analysis we've done just about the provision of service is that I would say with confidence that under the current structure, what is going to be required to keep the level of services that you are even in Bernardston is going to increase over time. I would say over the next 10 years, it's going to increase relatively substantially. So both towns are actually in good financial standing now, but on the horizon, you have people that are going to be retiring relatively soon. I'm not going to call any particular positions. And to fill them, you're going to be paying more. For example, CBiz, Bernardston made the decision at some point in the past to hire CBiz. They're paying more for CBiz to provide sort of that full-time town accountant services than hiring a part-time town accountant. And I wasn't there for that decision, but it's probably motivated by how hard it is to get a town accountant out here, as well as sort of make sure that you had the level of accountant services that the town wanted or needed.
I just want to say that the agreement that was reached was sharing police. So at one point, that same question came up. And the people involved sitting around the table worked it out, hammered it out into an agreement that both towns felt was fair. And so one just needs to assume that though we don't have the specific answer, that the answer would be achieved by talking. So anyway, sorry. Question?
Beth Kasdeba, Leyden. There are two boards that come to mind to me that are increasingly more difficult to staff in Leyden, and that's the Planning Board and the Board of Health. Is there any reason why you didn't touch upon those two boards?
I believe that we planned this meeting. I believe that they're scheduled to be specifically interviewed and reviewed coming up in the next few weeks. I believe so. But they're not. We haven't scheduled them prior to this event. Yeah.
Over there. Yeah.
Jane Dutcher, Bernardston, I think. I just have a couple of comments. On the accounting page, it says that the budget for Bernardston is $53,974. That does not include the contract with CBiz, which is $55,000. So you might want to make that little correction when you're comparing the numbers on that. There were some disappointments in listening tonight because I was involved in the beginning of this and in helping to write the grant. Three of us sat for days getting the grant together. And it was worth it because it got accepted and we got the money. But a lot of our discussion was not about money. It was about being able to fill positions that we used to be able to elect our neighbor to do. And now we can't do that anymore because the positions require professional training. And the state dictates a lot of that. You just can't go to the polls and say, Johnny's a good guy and Susie's a good gal, so we'll elect them to these positions. And they may not have any training in those positions at all. And that's why we have to have professional people appointed. And we all know that the pool of professional people for town positions is shrinking daily or maybe hourly. And that's why we really started this. It wasn't to try to save a dollar, and we never once talked about closing a library or a fire station or a town line or anything else. Even with the police department, there is a room up in Leyden for them to have an office up there. And I'm not involved in what the hours are or how it's used, but it is there. So we also should note on the fire business that when there's an alarm in Leyden, if it's on the east side of town, lots of times Bernardston's there first. If it's on the west side of town, sometimes Coleraine is there first. If it's in the center of town, Leyden's there first for sure. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just trying to point out that we already cooperate, and we just want to formalize some of these things that might help us to be able to operate better. Not necessarily cheaper, but better. And when we talk about cheaper, we're comparing it to what we're paying now instead of what we may have to pay in 2 or 4 or 10 years.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was great. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if I said earlier I'm the chair of the Finance Committee in Leyden, so it's good Jane and I'll talk on this. I think there's a consequence to not having good trained professional people. It can sometimes take a very long time to get permit processes. It can be, well, read the paper if you want to know what Leyden's been through in the last couple of years, and hiring Johnny and Susie from down the road just because they can show up to do the job does not serve the public, and it is not a good use of an efficient use of the tax dollar. That's just in my opinion of paying attention to this for a long time. And I think we can say the word save money, and I want to address just really quick the question about what does Bernardston get? And so it's my understanding with the policing agreement that, okay, so Leyden pays around a little over $100,000 from the beginning of this agreement, a little, of course it's going up, to the town of Bernardston. However, it's my understanding that you didn't have to add $100,000 of cost to the police department in order to cover Leyden. And what Leyden got was an increase in budget, but a much better use of our tax dollar through public service, professional trained public service, and first responder and first medical responder. That is a very big thing that our town got. Thanks to Liz Kidder, the town of Leyden is much safer than it was 5-6 years ago, and the use of our dollar to get what we got was very efficient. And I think Bernardston benefits because we give you $100,000 every year.
All right. Hey, okay. Are we going over time? Yes. Yes? I'll hang out for a little bit more. We'll do 5 more minutes.
So the question has come up on, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, in the blue T-shirt. You asked how is the money calculated in terms of the fee. So I was chair of the committee for Bernardston and Leyden that developed the intermunicipal agreement for police services, along with Jane and other people here. And we worked with somebody else from the Collins Center. And they went through and analyzed the services that the police provide, both in Leyden and Bernardston, because we are different towns. And the spreadsheet that the Collins Center developed is massive. I mean, I don't know that you can even email it properly. Jane's looked at it much more than I have, Jane and Ginger, the two of them. And it analyzed every aspect of the services provided and came up with a 17% figure that we pay 17% of the basic budget for the police department. And Bernardston figures out what the budget is, and then we just pay 17% of it. And we put money aside for a cruiser. And every 5 years, we buy another cruiser. And it evaluated all sorts of things. You know, number of road miles, number of square miles, roads, types of facilities in the town, how much time is spent patrolling in Leyden, how much time, typical number of calls received, types of calls. I mean, that spreadsheet is phenomenal. And that's how we came up with the figure. We had an outside person come in and evaluate the services and what our fair share would be. And I'm still on the committee, the chair of the Bernardston-Leyden Police Advisory Committee. And regularly, a couple times a year at least, I say to Jim, how does it feel? Does it feel like that's the right amount, or should Leyden be paying more? And he thinks about it, and he says, well, now, it's okay for now. And he'll let me know, and the committee know, when things change. If all of a sudden we have somebody moved to town who's constantly calling the police and causing problems, then they'll have to look at it. And that's why there's an advisory committee that meets quarterly to oversee that intermunicipal agreement to make sure it's still functioning and fair to both towns. So that's how it happened under that intermunicipal agreement.
All right, thank you, Liz. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I think we should all give both Anthony and ourselves a hand for showing up tonight. And there's, food to go boxes, and oh, sorry, don't leave yet.
Sorry, I'll shorten my closing remarks. I wanted to give you what the next steps are. And the Regional Advisory Committee talked about doing a survey of every town resident in both towns. And this is my third project representing Leyden on a study that works with the Collins Center. And the last study had this fabulous person named Stephanie Lessing, who's now been added to the team, and she can do a survey and analyze it and help you figure out the questions and how they should be asked. And so she's been brought on board, and we're going to be developing a survey that's going to be sent out to every household in the two towns and asking for them to come back. And you'll be able to respond in paper or online. Just go in, type it in, and send it in, and it goes right to Stephanie. And after that, and that's going to be coming up, she's working on it now. The advisory committee is going to review it. And we're also considering, at the next committee meeting, it's on the agenda to consider another public forum after that survey is done, just to discuss the survey results before the committee looks at final recommendations. So I just wanted to let you know. So when you get that survey, please fill it out and encourage everybody to fill it out to get everybody's thoughts in. This is only going to work if we get as much input as possible from everybody. So thank you, and thank you for coming. And if you have even any comments after tonight, just send emails and get them to Michelle or Karen, and they'll get them to the advisory committee. And thank you, Jack, for serving as moderator.